Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme, Richard Branson, the head of Virgin, will tell us how he sees the current state of the global business world and many other topics besides. And we'll meet Elijah Wood, the young actor who you may remember received worldwide acclaim for his role as Frodo Baggins in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But first, could Imran Khan be the next Prime Minister or even President of Pakistan? For years, his political feats have been overshadowed by his huge cricketing successes. But now, his popularity has suddenly increased massively, and his message to get rid of corrupt politicians, corruption itself, and to cut military links with the United States is resonating with Pakistanis. At a recent rally in Lahore, more than 100,000 people gathered to hear him speak. And the former Pakistan Foreign Minister, Mahmood Qureshi, has now joined his party, PTI as it's known for short. Imran Khan is with me right now. Imran, welcome.
Thank you.
The swell of support for your campaign and therefore for your party, focusing on corruption, and that must be, you must feel that everything's been worthwhile getting that message across.
Well, David, the third world is third world because of corruption. Corruption destroys governance. And because you don't have governance, you don't get any investment, there's no prosperity, you have poverty. So 15 years ago, when I started politics in Pakistan, it was my party that brought corruption as an agenda. Otherwise, no one talked about corruption because the two main parties were headed by the most corrupt politicians. So they would not talk about corruption, and so we brought this as a national issue. And so we call ourselves Movement for Justice. In other words, through justice and rule of law, you eradicate corruption. And it's an idea whose time has come.
Have people just come face to face with corruption in their lives, or why have they suddenly got the message?
Well, first what happened was that corruption was stopping the country moving ahead. When I came into politics 15 years ago. Today, corruption is destroying the country. For the first time, people feel that their survival is at stake. People feel that the country is a failed state. If we don't do something, the future of our children is bleak. And so I think and especially since Asif Zardari became the president, corruption just broke all records. And because of corruption, unemployment, mismanagement, cronyism, inflation. There's a fear that will we survive as a country? And that's why, certainly when people looked around, ours is the only party that is considered clean.
And so what do you do if and when you came to power or whatever, what do you do to deal with corruption? I mean, it's obviously sometimes it's intangible and so on. How do you get hold of it?
Actually, it's no rocket science, David. Any country that has tackled corruption, basically you have to have an independent accountability. Right. You need to have an independent justice system. The judiciary has to be independent of the executive. The problem in most of the developing world is that the executive co-opts the judiciary. It becomes part of the executive. So therefore, the corruption in the government cannot be checked. So the way you do it is have an independent justice system, which actually we do have in Pakistan. But at the same time, you need an independent accountability. So for instance, in England, you have the National Audit Commission. Now that's independent of the government. So unfortunately in Pakistan at the moment, all the accountability is basically a part of the government. So they cannot check any corruption within the government. So that's the number one issue. Secondly, a conflict of interest law. What happens is that our politicians come into government and then become millionaires and become industrialists, borrow money from nationalized banks, have them waived off. So you need to have a conflict of interest law.
And that is the key factor then, the independent accountability, and then the strength of the government to enforce it, obviously.
And of course, the government must, the minister, the prime minister must hold themselves accountable. In other words, declare their assets. At the moment, what happens in Pakistan, all the political leaders have their assets lying abroad. I'm probably the only one who's earned his money abroad and all my money is in Pakistan or my assets are in Pakistan. All the other leaders have concealed assets abroad. Like all in third world countries, you suddenly find Hosni Mubarak, billions lying outside, Ben Ali, billions lying, Gaddafi, billions lying outside. Same is the case in Pakistan. Our two main political leaders, most of their wealth is outside. Nawaz Sharif and Asif Zardari have huge properties abroad and they're concealed. So, declaration of assets. And I've already started.
Well, you've done that, haven't you? You've done that in the last few days.
I've declared my assets publicly. I've gone in front of the media and I said, look, these are my assets. And if you find anything that's not in my name, in other words, it's concealed, I'll give up politics. So it's throwing a challenge to the other politicians that you should also declare your assets.
Will they?
I'm afraid they won't, because if they declare their assets, the next question will be, where is the source of income to accumulate these assets? But it is the only way. It is the only way forward for Pakistan. The political class has to come forward, declare their assets, and then ask the other people to pay taxes.
And how will you run your campaign for the next election? I mean, how will you carry this message to the people?
Actually, you see, David, we have a very vibrant media, electronic media. In fact, the reason why my party has suddenly gone up and the popularity which we have, and it is the most popular party in Pakistan, is because of the electronic media. Every evening you have 8 current affair programs. And these current affair programs have the highest rating. I mean, no soap opera can match the current affair political programs. So the level of political awareness in Pakistan is unprecedented. People, you now have a politically aware public. It's very important for democracy to have a public that understands the issues. And that's thanks to the independent media.
And in terms of, you said here, talking about the conflict going on, the constant battle going on with militants and others, you said, if I came to power, I could end this conflict in 90 days, guaranteed.
Well, David, it's very important to understand what is happening in Pakistan. People don't understand it.
No, you're the best person to do that.
What is happening is that along the border with Afghanistan is the area called the tribal areas of Pakistan. In the tribal areas, Pakistan, only 40 laws of Pakistan apply there. They have their own policing. There's no Pakistani police there. There's no Pakistan justice system. And this area has always been independent, autonomous. These people have always lived through their own laws. And there are about 1 million armed men in the tribal areas. 1 million armed men. So if people don't understand that, they will not understand how to solve this ongoing war, which is endless at the moment. So the way I propose to win this war is to win the people of the tribal areas to our side. At the moment, what's happening is when the Pakistan army went into the tribal areas in 2004, they started doing military operations in villages. And they did military operations by using helicopter gunships. There were artillery, there were jets being used, causing massive collateral damage. So when there was collateral damage, the people rose up against the army and joined the militants. We did not have any militant Taliban in Pakistan. It took 2 years of collateral damage to create the Pakistani Taliban. So the way to solve this problem is to stop ceasefire, pull out of this war, tell the Americans we cannot sustain this anymore. Pakistan has had 40,000 people dead so far. We have equal amount handicapped through bomb attacks. Our economy has lost $70 billion. If we keep on going, the country is imploding. So we pull out of this war, we help the United States in finding a peace settlement. But so the moment we pull out of the war, we then ask the tribal people that, look, there is no longer a jihad. We are no longer fighting America's war. The moment we stop fighting America's war, the jihad will finish. What is jihad? Jihad is fighting a foreign occupation. The moment we are not seen as collaborators in a foreign occupation in Afghanistan, the people of the tribal areas will no longer then will then fight the militants. The militants are only a few thousand, 15, 20,000. The armed men in the tribal areas are 1 million. So to win the war, win the people of the tribal areas to your side and leave them to fight the militants. The war will be over in 30 days, maximum 90 days. I mean, the militants will disappear within 90 days if you win the people over to your side. It's a battle of hearts and minds. This battle can never be won through military means. There is no military solution.
What will be the ongoing relationship, first of all, with the United States, in a military sense and in a human sense, with the United States, and then we'll come on to the army itself?
Look, Pakistan must have friendly relationships with everyone. With the US at the moment, our relationship is lopsided. We are considered a hired gun, a country which is being paid to fight US's war against our own people. And that's why we're losing it. That's why you're finding our society getting radicalized. Extremism is growing in our society. In short, we're losing the war against militancy, against extremism, against the radicalization of our society. So our relationship with US should be of friends. Friends means that, you know, we are not going to be ordered to do what they want us to do. Friends mean that we would help them in getting out of Afghanistan, in trying to find a peace settlement. But friends does not mean that they pay us to fight our own people. The US has used drone attacks. Drone attacks meaning bombing in villages to kill militants. It is the most insane and immoral way of fighting terrorism. I mean, imagine if, say, in Manhattan there was some terrorist holdup. Would the US use drones to bomb in block of apartments? I mean, is this the way to fight terrorism? All they're doing is they're causing hatred because there's collateral damage. And I can, David, whatever they say, 80% of people who are killed are innocent civilians. And because this is a warrior race along the tribal belt, every man is armed. When there's collateral damage, the women and children get killed, all of them go and join the militants. So we're just increasing militancy. Every year the level of militancy is going up. It's insane what's going on.
What would be your relationship with the army? The army in Pakistan has a history of immense behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the scenes power and so on. Some people say actually you've got a very good relationship with the army. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but what will be the role of the army in relation to a regime of your own?
First of all, the army has played a negative role in Pakistan. It has stunted the growth of democracy, because whenever democracy has floundered, the army has walked into a vacuum. What should have happened is that the democratic process should have kept going, and that self-cleansing process should have come in. At some stage, we would have, like Indian democracy. I mean, India for 40 years did not have a real functional democracy. They had a one-party system. But after 40 years, suddenly it kicked in. And they've now, they're getting the fruits of democracy. In Pakistan, unfortunately, each time there was the democratic government stalled, the army came in. And the worst thing they did was they planted puppets. In fact, they chose politicians who they could control. So by definition, a politician you can control can never be a leader. So the leadership in Pakistan, just the political leadership could not come through. Now, at the moment, the reason why my opponents think that the army is helping me is because they're suddenly seeing this great surge in our popularity and these huge rallies. And while they are sinking, we are going up. And they think that there must be the hidden hand of the army behind it. The fact is that it's because of the other parties have completely got discredited. Or Asif Zardari, when he became the president, he co-opted all the politicians with him, all the political parties with him. So as things slumped, all the political parties went down with Zardari. So we, being the only genuine opposition, have now benefited and gone up. So what would be my relationship with the army? I would want the army to remain within its constitutional role. I would want, if my party comes to power, who has the responsibility must also have the authority. You cannot divorce a responsibility with authority. No management model works like that. So if we cannot have the authority, we would not take the responsibility.
I suppose you've talked about the two major parties in Pakistan so critically that it would be very difficult to you to ever forge a joint relationship, a coalition with either of those two parties, wouldn't it? Because you disapprove of them so strongly.
Absolutely out of the question. I mean, the reason I came into politics was against these two parties. You see, these are not political parties. They are family mafias. The two parties are run by families. There's the Sharif family, which runs one party. There's the Zardari or Bhutto family that runs the other party. Now, Asif Zardari's co-chairperson is his son. His son is 22 or 23-year-old. He is now chairperson of a party only because he happens to be the son of his father. This is not democracy. On the other hand, Sharif's, the two brothers ran the show for a while. Now their children have come in and they are now ready to inherit the party. This is totally against democracy. Our movement is exactly what is happening in the Middle East. In the Middle East, the movement is for democracy. People are sick of these dictators or monarchs who don't allow people their rights. And so it's a movement for rights and democracy. Same in Pakistan. So it's against the status quo. In the Middle East, it's a battle against the status quo. Exactly the same thing is happening in Pakistan. We represent the forces of anti-status quo who want democracy.
Imran, thank you very much for being with us. The years after the Second World War saw the United States emerge into the world's first truly global superpower. The global landscape, however, has since changed somewhat. Today, the US is a country with some serious problems. The budget, which was in surplus a little more than a decade ago, now has a deficit of Greek-style proportions. And there is complete policy paralysis in a number of areas in Washington. Internationally renowned author, columnist, and the recipient of 3 Pulitzer Prizes, Thomas Friedman addresses these problems in a new book called That Used to Be Us, or That Used to Be US. You can decide which way the pun works. It goes on, how America fell behind the world it invented and how we can come back. And he joins us now, Thomas joins us now from Washington. Thank you for being with us, Thomas.
A pleasure, David.
Your analysis there, starting with your analysis, what are the things that have majorly gone wrong in the last 20 years?
Well, David, if you think about it, America actually had a formula for success all these years. We didn't call it as such, but it really dates back to our earliest presidents, wasn't a president, but to Hamilton and Lincoln, and was really enriched by every president. This formula had basically 5 pillars. Educate our people up to and beyond whatever the technology is so they can get the most out of it. Have the world's best infrastructure, roads, airports, telecom, bandwidth. Have the world's most open immigration policy to attract the most talented and energetic immigrants from around the world, where they would start all these new companies in Silicon Valley. Have the best rules for capital formation and risk-taking and to prevent recklessness. And lastly, having the most government-funded research. Those 5 things really constituted our formula for success over the last 200 plus years. Now what's happened in the last 2 decades, if you look at all 5 of those, education, we've really fallen out to the middle of the pack in all the global testing. Infrastructure, well, I recently flew from Hong Kong to Los Angeles airport. That's like flying from the Jetsons to the Flintstones now, when you compare the infrastructure in Hong Kong and that in LAX. Immigration, we've had the Republican debates where you watch these Republicans competing over who can create more electric fences to keep Mexicans out. It's not exactly an inviting signal. The message to young people who come to study in America and get degrees here is thank you very much. Now that we've educated you, please go home, get out of here and compete with us from abroad. Rules for capital formation and investing, well, how did you like that subprime crisis? And government-funded research, I don't know if you've seen that graph in America, but lately it looks like an EKG heading for a heart attack. So if you look at basically the 5 pillars of our success, all of them are eroding and heading in the wrong direction.
Why should they all erode in the same way at the same time?
Well, it's a very good question, David. And I would say a couple of reasons. One is that we did the most dangerous thing a country or species can do. We misread our environment. We thought the end of the Cold War was a great victory, and of course it was a great victory for freedom. But it was also the onset of the biggest challenge we ever faced, because what did the Cold War victory do? It actually unleashed 2 billion more people in the world who wanted to live like us and aspired to live like us and could live like us. So just when we needed to be kind of lacing up our shoes and running the race faster, we actually put our feet up and relaxed. Then we compounded it in the last decade, tragically, by feeling the necessity after 9/11 to chase the losers from globalization, called the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, rather than the winners, called India, China, Brazil, etc. And so the two together really put us in a hole.
And what does America do about that now? Will it take as long, 2 decades or more, to begin to solve this, or what?
Well, it's going to take a while. We're not just in a hole of the subprime crisis. It's something much deeper. And what we need now, what we argue, myself and my co-author Michael Mandelbaum, is what we argue is that we need a politics now that brings together 3 things. We need to cut spending because we've made promises to future generations we simply can't keep. We need to raise revenue because we can't just cut spending. We would shred our social safety nets, and that would really undermine capitalism. Capitalism is a brutal system. It needs safety nets to be politically sustainable. But lastly, we need to invest in that 5-part formula for success. So we need, David, like a hybrid politics that doesn't quite correspond to the Republican or Democratic agendas.
And how does it correspond with the other emerging superpowers? I mean, how do you analyze China's progress at the moment compared with America's, for instance?
You know, in absolute terms, you know, the United States is so much richer. Our infrastructure is, broadly speaking, still better. You know, what's really happened is that there's been relative decline in the world because China, India, Brazil, other countries have caught up, and that's a wonderful thing. What really concerns us in the book is absolute decline. And there, you know, China's not the problem and not the solution. It's about what we do. I mean, the reason the book is called That Used to Be Us, the reason it has a forward-looking theme but a backward-looking title is because we did all this before. We actually had a formula for success. That used to be us. It can be again, but we've got to look back at what made us successful and get back to that.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for joining us, and we hope that there's a happy ending. And by the time the 7th edition of this book comes out, you'll be adding a happy ending, do you think?
Well, we tell everyone, David, that the book does have a happy ending already. What we don't know is whether it's fiction or nonfiction.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, in a minute, I'll be with movie star Elijah Wood and mega stellar businessman Richard Branson. That's all after this short break.